Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Life podcast. On today's show, I have the millennial money expert and founder of the collegeinvestor.com, Mr. Robert Farrington. But before we get talking about him, I want to tell you something. You listen to podcasts. Come on, man. You got a little podcast angel on your shoulder saying you should start a podcast. You can start your own podcast. Well, let me tell you something. Recording podcasts is fun. Talking to guys like Rob is fun. But you know what? Producing podcasts, hooking up RSS feeds, editing videos, doing all the stuff that goes with podcasts is a pain in the butt. So why not go to getagripstudios.com? That's right. Scott's waiting for you right now. Hire him to do all that dirty, nasty work. In fact, he actually likes to do it. Whereas most people hate doing it. Most people that actually he does podcasts as well, but he actually likes to record podcasts and edit them. So go to getagripstudios.com. Robert Farrington, what's happening, man?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This is great.
You're the first guest I've ever seen that retreat to his garage. You must have kids running around that house or something.
I got kids, Corona. I gave up the office because I was never able to go there. So this is now the setup in the garage, but it's not too bad. I'm in San Diego, so it never gets too hot, never gets too cold. It works out pretty well.
Better men than you have started in garages, my friend.
Hey, there you go. Is that
better men than us?
Better
men than us. Yeah.
There you go.
Sure. So I find when I speak to young people, when I speak to people of any age, but particularly young people, teenagers and that, a lot of them don't know the difference between debit transactions and Visa transactions. It's pretty scary, actually, the lack of financial sophistication in our world. And I think the credit card and the plastic contributes to it. The lack of cash actually contributes to like an effect of not allowing people to understand how much money they have. You're saying you're a millennial money expert. Are you talking about a generation of people, or are you talking about is that the name of your company, or what is that? What do you mean when you say that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a millennial. I started out talking predominantly. All right, but I talked mostly to millennials, but it really talks to anyone because money and the concepts of money are pretty universal, right? The fundamentals and stuff. But the difference is that we have different technology and services that some of the older generations didn't have access to, and so sometimes they reference tools or services or feel like the only way you can invest is with a financial advisor, and it's like, no, there's an app for that now. And so when you're talking to millennials, there's definitely different tools and services, but those fundamental concepts, like you said, what's credit, what's debit, how to use cash, that's universal. And I think you're spot on that. I think we have a real huge gap in financial literacy. I think that maybe using the card is a disconnect, and actually having cash is key. And I know some debt experts, some get out of debt experts love cash because it's tangible, you can hold it,
you can run out of it.
You can run out of it. You get that feeling of separating it out into different buckets of money, basically. And so,
people that pay cash actually spend 20% less.
Yep, exactly.
If you go out and I'm talking about the same people. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about different people. A person that if they use their card, will tip more, will order more, will be less frugal with their money if they use plastic. The same person will spend 20% more on cards.
It's all psychological because you don't have that feeling of being tangible when you swipe a card.
Now, you're an American, right?
Yep.
The student loan thing is a crisis in the United States, dude.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy.
I mean, people. I went to a. Sorry to interrupt you. There's that delay again, but I went to this craft show, and I was buying these craft earrings from this girl. She made herself with whatever old seashells or whatever. I don't know what it was. I was buying them for my wife, and I started to negotiate with her about the price because I have 3 daughters. So I wanted to buy 4 pairs. I'm like, can I get a deal? And she's like, I have $200,000 in college debt, and she just said this to me. Okay.
Oh my God.
As I'm at a thing, and I thought, whoa, okay, too much information for me, but sure, I'll pay full price. Go. I thought to myself, how did you get $200,000 in college debt? Who tricked you into that?
Well, we expect these 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds to make, thousands and thousands of dollar decisions because for whatever reason, and there's a lot of them, but we've pushed our society to this everyone needs to go to college at any cost kind of mindset, right?
Mm.
And, there's really inexpensive college options. You can go to a community college, a junior college for 2 years for free in about half the states. You
Hmm.
can transfer to a state school, finish up your degree, and that's usually like $7,000 a year.
Oh, it's
And,
reasonable.
so it's reasonable. But where people get themselves into trouble is going to an out of state school. They're living in the dorms. You go to live in a dorm for a year, you're automatically spending about $20,000 on top of whatever tuition
Mm.
is,
Sure.
right? And then you do that for 4 years, maybe 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can get over $100,000 in just living costs going to school. And then, you do probably have another $40,000 in tuition that you paid as well.
So,
But
and then, but the colleges, who loans them the money?
the government. And so that's the joke here is that, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Did
No, but hang on.
colleges
So
raise
there must be some sort of scheme. So there's like you don't actually go to the Department of where student loans and go and ask for a student loan. It's something to do with the schools or the banks. Is there some administration process in between this thing?
Well, you fill out the FAFSA, which is a government form, the free
Okay.
application for federal student aid,
Okay.
and then you are awarded federal student loans based on that. And for the most part, there are some sub-limits, but the overall limit of student loans is the cost of education,
Hmm.
effectively.
Hmm.
So then if you're a college, if I set the cost of my education a little bit higher, well, I know everyone can pay because the student loans will cover it. And then it turns into this vicious cycle every
Yes.
year
That's what I sense.
where, yeah, right? And so it's
Yeah.
like you go back 20 years and the cost of education was much less.
Sure.
But, schools are competing for customers.
Sure.
Right? Students are customers. They're not necessarily students. So how do you entice customers, right? You first have great professors. Okay, but that's cheap. Then you need great dorm rooms and facilities and sports stadiums, and that's expensive. And you take
Sure.
out loans, you service that debt, and then you pass that cost on to people that can pay because they're going to get student loans that will cover the cost of education. Right? And so here we are, you fast forward this competition for students 30 years, and we are where we're at today with outrageous cost of education, a student loan debt crisis, and the value of that college degree has declined significantly in the United States. A lot of these tech companies are like, I don't care if you have a college degree or not. Like, I just want to know if you can code, and you can
Sure.
learn to code in like 100 different ways, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple things in Canada and the United States. There's an overemphasis on tech jobs. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. But
like
there's also trade jobs. There's also all kinds of
I
jobs
mean,
that you can do
listen, when
without
you're a
college degrees.
tradesman, you get paid to learn. It's the other way
Yep.
around.
Totally.
I was talking to someone in the States, and they were talking, oh, yeah, the trades is where we dump our non-college people. It's like, what? Like, the number one way a man becomes a business owner is through a trade, actually. Becomes a tradesman and then starts his own
Yeah.
company. That's the number one
Yeah.
path to becoming a business owner, is through
Yeah.
a trade for a man. And this idea that somehow being a drywaller or a carpenter or a framing carpenter or something is an underclass of people. These people are paid very well, and there's a huge shortage of them in our economy. And a lot of men really enjoy doing those kinds of jobs, actually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the hard part is though, and we see this in our high schools. I don't know if you guys see this in yours, but when I went to high school, what is it, almost 20 years ago, 15 years ago, auto shop was just discontinued. They got rid of wood shop. All these things were done, but you know what they replaced them with is like computer classes and everything.
Sure.
And so if you're not exposed to these things though too, it's hard to teach a kid that say like these are viable career paths if your whole life has gone through with no exposure to trade jobs or anything. Now maybe you have an uncle or a father or somebody that was
Sure.
doing these jobs that can show you that path. But if we don't show kids the path, and this is why we kind of get in the college thing too, if we don't teach kids about money and how it works and what you're spending versus what you're getting out of college, it's hard for a 17-year-old to make a rational decision in general, but to make one that really impacts their future is tough if we don't expose them to these things.
No one ever said, I've never heard anyone say this, okay, in my life, and I speak to people all the time. No one ever says to me, you know what? Thank God I took that financial savvy course in grade 11. Never heard that said in my life, okay?
Yeah.
Everyone, whenever I hear people talk, if I meet someone who's very good with money or very financially sophisticated, it's always, my grandmother sat me down and showed me all kinds of stuff, or my father was teaching me about the difference between an asset and a liability when I was in high school. And these things are not taught. You know why they're not taught? Because I don't think many teachers know. I gave a talk actually at a high school about entrepreneur. They asked me to speak about entrepreneurship. And I went to the high school and I started to give a speech about entrepreneurship, and I'm looking at these kids. I'm like, okay, you guys need some basic financial literacy before we go any further. This is what is an asset. This is what is a liability. These are the 4 kinds of assets, that exist in the world. And I started breaking it down. And you know what? The teachers were listening more than the students, actually. There were 4 teachers in the room. And they came up to me after and they're like, holy mackerel, I didn't know that those 4 types of asset classes existed and what they meant and why you should need to know them, why assets are broken out like that by the financially sophisticated. So I don't think it's taught. How are you in your business? So your business every day, are you a speaker? Are you actually loaning people money? Are you showing them investment vehicles? What are you doing?
No, so we're a media site. So we're one of the largest personal finance sites here, and we're just trying to educate. We have some tools and services and stuff, but it's really about connecting those dots, providing online, education for free, though. I mean, we're just trying to publish great quality, personal finance content from everything. We review most of the products and services that we can get our hands on so we can give unbiased opinions on them. We, connect all those dots on how to save, how to invest, how to get out of student loan debt, what's student loan forgiveness, what are these options, how do you deal with all these things. And so we do it full time and have a virtual team that takes care of it as well.
Let me ask you a couple questions then more about this student debt crisis in the States, because I'm kind of interested in it. Do you think it needs massive reform?
Yes, but there's 2 sides of the equation, and I think it gets convoluted. You have the paying for college and cost of college, and how do you get there? And then how do you deal with the 43 million people that already have student loans? And it's hard because you can't really fix the student loan debt crisis without fixing the paying for college crisis, because let's just say you do blanket student loan forgiveness, which it probably won't happen, but theoretically, well, then what do you do for the poor kid that's a sophomore this year that has to take loans for next year because we never changed the way we're paying for college, right? So
it's like the cannabis legalization of cannabis problem. Do we release the people from prison who are in jail for cannabis crimes before we make cannabis illegal? Before we make it legal?
Right.
Like, because it's legal in Canada, right? So you have all these people in jail for cannabis related crimes. Are we going to let them out of jail? Or are we going to keep them in jail? And there's a lot of issues with that kind of thing. So you have 2 problems. You have people with student debt, and you have people coming into the system.
Right.
You're working on the people with the debt.
We talk to both. I talk a lot at high school kids about paying for college and their families, right? Because it's usually a family financial choice. And then we talk a lot to people with dealing with student loan debt, that all the way from, just graduated to retirement age, because maybe a parent borrowed for a child, or maybe they kicked the can down the road for 20 years and they're like, how do I retire? But I'm still trying to deal with my student loans. And so there's reforms that are needed all around, right? And there's definitely things that could be done very easily. And, there's options, but it's challenging.
Is it all owed to the federal government?
Most of it is. 80% of all student loans are federal student loans, and then you have 20% that are private, and those are very much like car loans, student loans. They have very few options in terms of what you can do for repayment and loan forgiveness, and they function just very like a mortgage or a car loan.
It's interesting because I wonder if insurance companies buy student loan debt.
They do.
Investment companies do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if it's like a really lucrative place to put your we're in charge of the electrical workers of Ohio, and we've a pension fund, and we've invested our money in student loan debt.
So it was sold as that, and it's turned out to be a really horrible investment. And a lot of these companies don't want to touch it anymore, which is part of the reason why it's been federalized so much. Because it used to be exactly like that before 2007. Everything was sold, repackaged, collateralized, and then sold as big packages of loans, right? But the defaults are huge. So like even when you make money on other loans, when you're running a 10 to 20% default rate on your student loan portfolio, it's not going to be a great return on you.
Yeah, well, you know what the problem is that they've loaned this money to people that don't really have an education for anything. Like, one of the problems with one of the things when you look at going to school, say, let's say you're gonna pay to go to school, okay? Well, the first question I think that should be asked is, so that is an investment, right? You're making an investment in yourself, right? In your education.
You're talking my language here.
Right?
This is exactly what I preach. Yep.
Right. So shouldn't people be saying, well, what is going to be the return on your gender studies degree?
And that's it. And so like, I never want to dismiss anyone from a career field, but I think we need to have a real conversation about what you want to do. If you want to go be a teacher, that's great. But what's the median teacher salary in your state? Are you going to start at $40,000? Okay. Well, you probably don't want to borrow $150,000 to go make 40. Now, there's still great paths to be a teacher. Like I said, go to community college for 2 years for free, transfer to your local state school, get your degree for $15,000.
Exactly.
And then you can go start at 40,000. Your path makes sense.
Yes.
Right? If you
There's a return on investment. The return on investment is I'm gonna get my money back in 3 years. I'll be able to pay my rent, live a life, go on a vacation, and pay my student debt off in 3 or 4 years. 25% return on investment. Whatever.
Exactly. And now if you want to go be a tech job or an engineer and you're going to make 65, well, same, you can spend more, right? Because you know you're going to earn more. But you have to have these conversations about it because there's also so many paths. Like I said, you don't need to go to the fancy out-of-state school if all you want to do is be a teacher. Like, what's the path that is going to get you to where you want to be? And that's what we have to think about.
Totally agree with you. And the other thing as well is like, so there's the university system in Canada is a little bit different than the college system in the States, but you have the same effect. So there was the old joke. So my university, Queen's University, it's called, in Kingston, Ontario, has the best engineering school or whatever, right? Or whatever, top 3 or something like that. When I was there, it was number 1. Whatever it is now, it doesn't matter. The point is this. What do you call an engineer from Queens? And what do you call an engineer from Lakehead?
An engineer.
An engineer.
Right.
Like, that's what you call them, right? What do you call a doctor? You can do insert doctor, right?
Totally.
And so the second thing is, like, you get a bunch of people, like, so they have the different admission standards, right? So Queens is like, a higher, people with 80 plus averages and stuff like that go to Queens. But guess what? They still need people. When they get there, they get re-separated into these groups, right? Where some people get 60, some people get 50, right? So all those A students are now restacked, A, B, C, D, E, right? And so why not go to the other school and graduate summa cum laude and be the valedictorian?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, why swing it? Why swim with the sharks? Why not go to go somewhere where it's gonna be easier? I mean, I hate to say this. Shoot a little lower. I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
But here's the thing: is the value of the degree too is so much more social signaling than anything else. Is you're just signaling to your future employer that's like, hey, I did it. I checked the box. I got this degree. Because you know what? 3 years after you graduate, no employer really cares where you went to school. Right?
Exactly.
They're just like, hey, what did you do for work? What can you do for my business? Like, they don't really care where you went to college. So the value of your degree declines like so fast after you graduate,
of course,
that it becomes pretty much worthless about the 3-5 year mark. And all employers are caring about at that point in time is what you've done and what you're going to do. They don't care where you went to school.
So colleges hate you or like you? I can't tell here. I think they kind of dislike what you're saying right now, because I totally think you're right. It's like, when let's say you're a doctor, you probably went to 4 universities actually, right? I mean, at the end, when you're finished, you've been to 4.
Yep. Well,
and,
it's hard. because I think the colleges don't hate me, but I think the colleges are learning that they need to reform how they're operating. And some of them will get it and some of them won't. And I think the interesting thing is, we're in the middle of this pandemic. I think a good chunk of them aren't going to come out of this.
Agreed.
Like, I think we're going to see in the United States, we're going to see a wrath of college bankruptcies here pretty quick, because with schools going online, like, why would I pay for online Harvard? That they announced yesterday that they're not even going to lower tuition, right? Even though school is all going to be online, when it's like I could go to my local community college for free and still take English 101 online. Like English 101, it doesn't matter whether I take it at Harvard or at the community college. Like, why would I pay $40,000 a year versus, nothing? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this next year or two shakes out.
So I studied English Lit in university.
Okay.
That was my, I'm a dropout. I dropped out. But yeah, it was just too expensive. I looked at it and I'm like, I was $7,000 in debt. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to pay that off. I'm out of here. I'll come back later when I have more money. That's what and think about it. People are hundreds of thousands at the age of 19, 20, 21.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting. Like, you know what English 101 is about? It's about reading the books.
Right?
You have to read the books, okay? So many people at Queen's didn't read the books, okay? I'd be in a lecture on Conrad, D.H. Lawrence and Conrad and Joseph Conrad, and he'd be sitting there, and these books are like this, and there's one a week for each of them, right? Nobody read the books. Top university. People weren't even reading the books. So, I mean, why not go to your community college if you want to read a lot of books, or the library even if you want to read a lot of books, actually? I hate to say it.
But you're spot on, because here's the thing is education today in 2020 is free. You can get the best education online for free. You can download books for free. Mm-hmm. You can go watch the best professors in the world. Their lectures are on YouTube. You could even pay a small amount for courses on various platforms, right? So if you want education, it's very different than college. College, you're doing because you're trying to boost your future earnings at a job by social signaling that you have a degree. But if you're just trying to get educated for the sake of getting educated, you can do that for free.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is that I would say that the most practical education takes place in the workplace, where you're being
on the job
trained.
training, right?
Yeah, for sure, dude. Like, people come into Atlas Lighting, and it's like I talk to them, and we just because of COVID, we had to change some of the things people were doing. And I looked at one of my top guys, and I said, look, if you do this for the next 6 months to a year, 2 years, depending on how long everything takes, maybe 5 years, you'll know a lot about lighting, and you might be the youngest guy in Canada that knows this weird information about lighting. You know what I mean? And nobody else will know it. And you'll know it very well, because you're going to do some software upgrade for me that involves sorting out all this information. And in that process, you're going to learn all this different stuff. Plus, you have your audit experience and all these other things. You're going to be a pretty sharp lighting guy. And a lot of people are going to be willing to pay money for someone like that. That's not a degree. A university can't teach you that. Nope.
Right. But you get that industry training, that industry knowledge, and that's how it goes with every job, man. Like, I started after college as a retail store manager. You think they taught me how to do that in school? Like, no, not at all. Like, I learned how to go to college, and then I learned on the job by doing it and starting at the bottom of folding shirts and stocking things, and you learn how it goes, right? Like,
totally. And you know what the thing is too? Is there's also, like, what blows me away, and I don't know if this is for sure true about all schools, but, like, how could a beer company sponsor a college football team when a huge number of those people are not allowed to drink beer?
Yeah.
And there's like a commercialized process when you send your kids to university, where we're going to expose your kids to a lot of partying and social activities. It's almost like a way to delay adulthood for some people. You don't have to be an adult.
Totally is.
You can go here for 4 years and get drunk every night or whatever. I don't know.
But, I mean, you're right. I think that is one of the more valid aspects of going away to school, though. It's not the partying per se, but, like, I think on the flip side, as a lot of kids lived a sheltered life, didn't get exposed to things, didn't necessarily develop any independence. And so, at least by going away to school and living in a dorm room, they might gain some soft skills that we don't talk about as much, which I do think is one of the values left of going away to school. The soft skills like how to make new friends, how to communicate well, how to handle things when your parents aren't around, to be it, because you've probably heard helicopter parents and all these kind of sayings, and I see a lot of that, because sadly, even from college kids, right, like college graduates, where it's like mom would still call the office to like call for their kid. It's like, what, your kid graduated college and they're in their 20s and your parents are still calling for you? Like, it happens more than I think most people would understand.
Why is it that why there's something to this there? I'm trying to figure out why this system exists, because when I read about American college student debt, I'm always like, sounds like a really bad idea, actually, or that doesn't sound right to me. There sounds like there's some sort of scheme here. People are getting their hooks into people when they're really young. It's like
But it's
you go ahead. Yeah, you go.
No, I was gonna say it's psychology, right? So like we've created this thing where the whole society shames parents and their kids if they don't go to college, because everyone needs to go to college to get a degree, but we've created this system around it. So I honestly, we've talked about the math here, the math, and this is the math, and that's the ROI.
Mhm.
But I think the bigger challenge that most people need to overcome is that social stigma, the psychology. Parents need to be teach their kids that it's okay to make a choice for them, not necessarily to please others. And like, how do you raise more independent people in this country is what we really need to talk about. And then how do we create more independent adults as well?
Wow, that's a whole rabbit hole. Independent leads to interdependence, right? And leads to strength, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I think I have a theory. One of the things that I think is wrong with the way we develop our youth, okay, is that there's this shame culture that exists, okay? And it's huge now. Now it's like, you're not wearing a mask, how dare you? People have really learned to use the shame culture in order to gain compliance to bizarro things that shouldn't or not other people's business. But also, I think there's a time in your life, how if you don't learn to talk before you're 4, you'll never learn to talk. Like there's things like that.
Hmm.
Like if you don't learn to speak words before 4 or 5 years old, you'll never learn to speak any language. You just won't learn. Your brain won't learn properly. So there's times for things. I think there's an age where people can learn skills very, very, very quickly, and I think they learn to be independent. And I think if we miss that window, we end up with like coddled groups of people that are not. It's not possible for them to live alone. And I think they have a name. I think it's called the Millennials. No, I'm not kidding with you. I think it's they're the most maligned generation. I mean, they are the most codependently related to their parents of any generation. I mean, like our whole society. I didn't even know my generation had a name until the Millennials came along. I didn't even know that there was a name for Gen X. I'm Gen X.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that because nobody cared about what we were called.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
all you hear about, millennials need this, millennials need that. How about you screw off and leave them alone? Maybe they don't need you actually to help them. I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. It seems like all you hear about is what the millennials need. They need consultants. They need the job set up differently for them. You need to put ping pong tables in the front room so the millennials will be happier because they're not into committing to anything and they're not into homeowner. How dare you take a group of people and treat them like this? It's disgusting to me. It's like our society. It's like the baby, because the millennials are the kids of the baby boomers, right? It's like the baby boomers have locked their kids in the basement and won't let them out or something. It's gross.
Yeah, and here's the more ironic part is I see it in the news now all the time too. It's like, millennials are doing this and whatnot. And it's like, millennials are getting close to pushing 40 here. Like it's like
Sure.
they're not like young kids anymore. Like they're in their late 20s, they're in their mid 30s. Like, it's time that you really start understanding what happened. Now, they definitely have some defining factors of why they hate a lot of the things that exist. Like you let them all graduate college into one recession, like, and now like here we are into another recession, and it's all caused by these baby boomers, right, that are doing all kinds of things. But it's like, oh, millennials are terrible with debt. Well, no one talks about all the baby boomers that lost all their houses in 2007 to 2009 because they were bad with debt. It's like the story's a little different,
Sure.
maybe a different kind of debt, but it's the same stuff. Everyone's the same. Like, oh, millennials are lazy. I can show you plenty of boomers and Gen X's that are lazy too. It really
But like,
doesn't
what
make
if you
difference.
take out the word millennial and replace it
Totally.
with a race, or
Yeah.
replace it with a gender, or do something like
Yeah.
that? Like, you don't
Totally.
speak about groups of people like that. It's disgusting.
I agree.
It's disgusting.
You can't generalize. It's like it's so wrong.
It's totally wrong. Like this idea, millennials are like this. What are you talking about? Like, just take out the word millennial and replace it with any other description of a human being. And you're a complete asshole for saying that. But for some reason, everyone's allowed to kick the millennials. And they need help. You need to help them in the workplace. You need to rethink about that workplace of yours, and so the millennials will. It's almost like a maligning of. There's like we have a culture war, a generational war, and it's. I don't understand, and I would be pissed off too if somebody duped me into going to college for 4 years and I had $150,000 of debt when I was 22. That looks like a pretty big mountain to climb, actually.
Exactly. And that's where these kids are at. They're like, I was forced to go to college. Well, forced. But when you're 17, 18, your parents are like, you got to go to college.
Sure.
It's a different thing, right? And then here you are, and you graduated right into a recession. So you're already a couple years behind. So you don't really get on your feet until you're 25, 27. Meanwhile, your student loan debt has been growing the whole time.
Sure.
It's like, it's very easy to see why we're here and why we need some solutions to this problem. But we also need to reform the situation because it's just going to keep happening. It's going to happen with the Gen Z or whatever's coming up next and all the other generations. Like, we need to talk about these things and fix it. Independence, paying for college smart, ROI, like, how do you take care of this whole system? But, there's a lot, it's a lot there, a lot of nuances.
I have a little bit of a theory. So, yeah, the water that we drink doesn't know that there's a line across the 49th parallel that divides Canada and the United States. It just flows over the border. Like, you can't stop it. The air doesn't know that, right? So the Earth is not aware of all this social geography we've created for ourselves. There's a line here, and there's a line. Iowa is this, right?
Right.
This is Des Moines or whatever, right? And this is the line. And so, these ideas about who we are. Canada is nothing more than the accumulation of decisions by its citizens to do either the right thing or the wrong thing. And as soon as that balance starts to go off, where think about it just as like decisions every single day. I'm going to run a red light. I'm going to jaywalk.
Absolutely.
I'm going to steal. I'm not going to pay for that. I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to cheat there. I'm going to work the system. I'm going to do this. You know what we should do? We should take advantage of an entire generation of people by saddling them with debt. And the colleges turn around and go, that's a great idea because now we can increase the cost of education 3 times the rate of inflation while adding no value to it, right? So these are just decisions.
Exactly.
They're just decisions that people are making every day, and they're sitting around spinning them so they can make it look like they're doing something good when they're actually doing something bad. Okay, and they're not to say that it's an overt crime is wrong, but there's certainly a negligent element to it, and there's a covert element to it of They know that it's not good to graduate with a degree in English and have $150,000 worth of debt. That is not good for anybody. They know this,
Right.
but they did it anyway. So all we have is the decisions of these leaders that are making these decisions. So what you need is a more intelligent, or what we need in Canada and the United States is a more intelligent populace that has financial savvy, but also has good morals. I don't know how you're going to do that, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, some places are talking, and you joke because, like, what about these financial literacy classes in school that no one pays attention to? Well, in the United States, there's no such thing. Like, we don't even offer financial literacy
No,
classes.
they don't
Maybe
offer
like
it in
one.
Canada either because the teachers don't know
Yeah.
about it.
Right. But then it's like you wonder what would happen if we start educating. And granted, it's probably not going to be the best solution by any means, but it's like a starting point, right? Like, let's educate a little bit. We have charities that do this work right now in the United States. We have a company, like a charity called Junior Achievement, that tries to teach elementary school kids the basics of money by like going and doing like an assembly and teaching the kids how like a bank works and a grocery store works and stuff. But it's like, why is this left to charity? Why are we having, nonprofits try to help kids understand the
The
basics of
most
money? And you're right,
important skills you have are your financial skills.
right? I mean, you nailed it. What I try to teach my kids is two things: is be kind and be good with money. Because if you're kind and like a good person and you're good with money, you'll be set. I don't care what you do in life. That's really all it takes, and
Totally. I was talking to a guy yesterday on the show, and he's talking about capitalism, right? Which is now I could insult you, Robert Farrington, by calling you a capitalist now. That's an insult, right? But so they're talking about like money is the root of all evil, and what we have is these evil capitalists. But you know what? Anybody that says that would trade wallets with that guy in 2 seconds if they had the chance. Okay, in a second,
Yeah.
like it would change in a second. They would take his stuff immediately and switch and sit on the top of the mountain if they could. But what I think the reason why these things are not taught, is because people don't know them.
Right.
As soon as you know about this sort of thing, as soon as someone sits you down, and there's basic, it's not complicated actually. It's very simple. Okay.
Yep.
But like let's take a tragedy. So let's say you wanted to help out a community of people that were in poverty. Okay. What you would do is try to get those kids to go to college. Right?
That's a joke, though. It's not going to help them. Yeah.
Right? When really what you should do is put them into trades or get them to some place where they can make money right now. Right now. Where they can make a good wage right now. Not go work at Walmart and get your degree. No. I want to get you into a trade where you can learn to make $20 an hour or whatever. How do you restructure this? So you're doing this, or you're not a charity though. The collegeinvestor.com is not a charity. Are you a not-for-profit?
No, we're definitely a for-profit corporation here.
Good. So you're making money teaching people about financial literacy.
Yep, and we do it by trying to, like I said, we review and we connect people with products and services. Well, of course, those products and services may pay, not all of them, but some pay, right? And so we connect them. But if it's a tool we like or a service we like, we'll write about it, we'll cover it, and that's how we earn money, right? And then advertising dollars on the site and things like that.
What's the number one skill you think people should know about debt? What do you think people should know about debt?
Well, the number one skill about either of them is get organized. Because I'll tell you, in 10 years of helping people with their student loan debt and with their money, 99% of people that are struggling with it, they can't even tell me why. Like, they're not even organized. They don't know how much they have in student loan debt. They don't know how many loans they have. They don't know what their income is. They don't know what their expenses are. Like, they're just not organized. So I can't even have a conversation with you about what to do until we figure out what you have. And do we need to cut your budget? Do we need to earn more money? Like, what levers can we pull? I can't tell you because they don't even know what they have.
That's interesting. I talked to a financial advisor once, and we were talking about when you look at someone's credit rating. So in Canada, I don't know if you guys have the same companies. One's called Equiton in Canada. The other one's called anyway, you can get a credit report on yourself, and it will show you all your loans and your credit card debt and this kind of stuff on it, right? And he was telling me that in the States, people will have, like, the average person will have like 10 different loans or 15 different loans. And usually it will include multiple student loans, healthcare debt, via
Credit
like health
card.
credit
Yeah.
cards, right?
Car loan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
car loan and like just ongoing this thing. How does this system like it sounds to me like it's like two drunks leaning together to stand up or something. How does this system maintain itself? Like how
Well,
does it
it's the payment culture, and this is what I really rail against too. It's this payment mentality, right? You make $5,000 a month. Well, as long as all your monthly payments can get structured in this box of $5,000, like you're okay, right? So, maybe, I can structure this car loan to be, 94 months or something outrageous, because then I can get your payments down to a place that you can afford it, right? And it's the same with all these forms of debt and stuff. And so people are like, well, I can afford that because I make that monthly payment every month. And then I can afford this subscription service because it fits into my budget. And then people have this payment mentality where they never actually build any kind of wealth or escape their debt.
They need a net worth mentality.
Exactly. I like to call it just, they need to build real wealth, not just, have a nice monthly income. It's why we even see these doctors in the United States, man. It's like, these doctors make $600,000 a year, but they spend $595,000 of it because
they spend $700,000 a year.
Right. But they have their second home and their boat and, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, well, I can afford all the monthly payments, but then here they are at 70, still having to work because if they stop working, they don't have the income to support the lifestyle that they've had for 30 years.
I think one of the things that when I talk to people about it, I don't get to talk to a lot of people. I have to be asked because I'm not in a position like you, because I find teaching this super fun. Actually, you see people's eyes go wide open like this, right? Like, that idea of it's interesting because I just actually refinanced some stuff. Cause I have some rental properties, blah, blah, long story short, but I just refinanced some stuff because of what the situation we're in now. I don't know if they're going to be giving out that kind of loans in a year. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah.
So I was just setting some things up, lines of credit and whatever. And they were so focused on my income, right?
Yeah.
Like what my income is, right? And it's like, I almost have no income. Like, what are you talking about? I don't have income. Like, I only pay myself what I need to live and the rest is invested. I don't have a big income, right? So like, well, give us your T4A. Well, how come you and your wife make exactly the same amount? How come, this and that? Like, it's interesting that you pointed out because it's the same thing. They want me to be able to make the payments, right?
That's it.
They're not looking at the net worth of the individual. They're looking at the income on your tax return and saying, looking at the payments on that Equiton statement that you have. And they're saying, yeah, there's room for another $350 a month for the next 12 years.
That's it. You got it. And if you can afford it, they'll give it to you. No questions asked. But then if they don't understand it, or you have a different setup, then they're like, what? This doesn't make sense. Does not compute. Probably had to get some like special, like high level person to approve your loan or something, right? Like,
yeah, it's been taking weeks now. We're on to 5 weeks, right? Because and like I think it's like 75 documents, right? Because I pay myself enough to live my lifestyle that I want, like things that are not tax deductible that I have to buy. I buy them, right? Like groceries, right? I have to buy groceries. I have 4 kids. I have to buy $500 worth of groceries a week. My wife's car is not in the business. It's our personal family car. Got to pay for that. Like there's little things like that. But other than that, why would you pay yourself stuff? You have to pay so much taxes on it. So anyway, long story short, it's interesting. I learned something from you today that they're interested in your income to see if they can slot their payment into your income, and they don't care how long it takes you to pay for it.
No, they don't. And then, it's like at the end of the day, like a car note, right? Like they'll structure that payment whatever they can to afford for you to pay it. And then at the end of the day, if you don't, they'll come repo your car anyways. So it's like they don't really view this. They don't view this as like a lose-lose at all. They view it as a win-win. You're the one that's taking the lose-lose, not the bank or the car dealer.
So here's the two things that when I talk to people, the first thing I tell them if they ask me, hey, what would you do? I tell them that debt is not wealth.
Right.
What do you
100%.
mean? Like when debt is not wealth. Wealth is your assets minus your liabilities. That's the wealth you have. So your debt, how
worth,
much you can buy, or what people see, your status signals, the Audi that you paying or whatever, that's not wealth. That's debt. Okay?
Yep.
So I tell them that. But the other thing is that I wonder if this is something that is funny. You know how the Federal Reserve and the Bank of Canada talk about interest rates, right? You know how they talk about that.
Yeah.
We're going to lower the interest rates.
We're going to set it. Yeah. We're going to set it at this level, whatever. Yeah.
Right. So they actually have no control over the interest rates, which is interesting. Okay. So there is an interest rate, but the Federal Reserve only has control over things like mortgages, personal mortgages, and their own debt.
Their own debt. Yeah. What they let out. Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
So like the debt of the United States of America, right? That's the interest rate they're controlling. But there's a whole other market out there of debts which has a completely different interest rate than the one that's being put out by the Federal Reserve of the United States or the Bank of Canada, right? So people have to understand that interest rate does not even cover the inflation of the money. Right? So how do you start to explain to people return on investment and risk versus reward and medium risk? Do you get into that with people much?
Yeah, we do. I mean, definitely with risk versus reward, because I'm a big believer in starting to invest as early as you humanly can.
Sure.
Start investing in college, even if it's $100 that you can put in there a month.
Sure.
Because you let that grow for 20 years, like you'll have a significant leg up over everyone else. Like you start waiting. I mean, the math is if you start investing at, 22 and you put $300 in a month at like a basic 8% return, you'll be a millionaire at 65.
Where are you going to get 8% though for someone when they're 21?
Well, you put it in the stock market. This is just the average return of the S&P 500 over, 30 years. But then on the flip side, if you wait until you're 30, you got to start saving $800 a month to hit that same goal.
Sure.
And if you wait until 40, you're at $2,000 a month to hit that same goal of being a millionaire at 65. So it's like the more time you have, time in the market is so much more powerful than trying to time the market.
Actuarial tables is so interesting in insurance too. It's like the time to buy $1 million universal life policy is when you're like 1.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, it's so cheap. But it's like the older you get, the later it is before you start thinking about your finances, the harder it is to get ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Because it just costs more. It's so much more expensive to try to get that because your compounding comes over time.
Yes.
And you give yourself less time, but time is the only variable really working against us as humans, right? Like we have a finite amount every day. It's getting less and less. And if you don't take action today, one of my favorite Chinese proverbs is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Sure. The second best time is today.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Because like every single day you wait, right? It's just the tree could be growing for you, but you're not letting it grow.
They say the devil is a liar. You heard that before?
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. I think the devil is a procrastinator.
Okay. How so?
Well, because procrastination pushes all your problems into the future, right?
Yeah.
So like when you're procrastinating, so you say the devil's a liar. No, he's not. He makes you not do what you're supposed to do. That's his number one thing.
Yeah.
The devil wants you not to do what you're supposed to do, which is pay your taxes, or save your money. He like, I can do that later. I can do that later. I can do that later. The devil's a friggin' procrastinator. And you know what procrastination does? It's really an evil thing because when people procrastinate, they make their problems all the people they care and live with problems.
Yeah.
So when you procrastinate, you give your problems to all the people that you live with, which are the people usually you care the most about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Robert Farrington, anything else for the audience out there in terms of the Millennial Money Expert? Stop procrastinating.
Man, no. Yeah, stop procrastinating. Start saving, get out of debt. Man, we covered a lot of psychological stuff today. I love it, though. This is great because I think the math is always the math, right? You can't really argue with that, but it's all this psychology, all this behavioral stuff that really makes a difference. And, you have to be confident as an individual to maybe go against the grain of what your family has always done, what your friends are doing. You got to do what's right for you so that you can take care of yourself. Because here's the thing. Everyone's judging you all the time, right? They judge you when you're 17 and you don't go to college. They judge you when you're 22 and you're working full time. But they're also going to judge you when you're 35, you have a nice house that you've paid for and you're not in debt. And they're going to look and they're going to be like, how did he do it? And they're not going to remember all the crap you went through for the last 10 years. They're just always judging you in the present, and no one remembers the past.
Yeah, it's sad. It's like the overnight success was 15 years in the making, right?
Exactly. No one remembers the work you put in. No one remembers all that stuff.
What about consumerism? Because I spoke to a fellow yesterday, and we had a talk about the idea, the consumerist lifestyle as a something not from your perspective, not from the financial management perspective, but just from a morality perspective, right? Like consumerism. And I think there's also an issue in America, and not as much in Canada, but also in Canada as well, with this status signaling using things that you need debt to buy.
Yeah. No, totally. Well, it goes back to once again.
Trap? How do you get them out of that trap?
It's that payment mentality that they're just looking to fill it in. I can charge these like $300 sneakers on my credit card because I know it's only going to cost me $5 a month for like 8 years or whatever it is. And so they're filling in their payment mentality, and that's how you break it. Because I'm also kind of like, you do you. I'm never going to judge anyone on their purchases. Like if you want to buy this thing, but at the end of the day, don't complain to me that you're poor or broke or whatever, right? Like you either can afford it or you can't afford it. If you can afford it, well, if that's what you want to waste your money on, cool. It's not my jam,
Yeah, sure.
But like on the flip side, like my biggest pet peeve is that you're not allowed to complain about it. You're not allowed to complain that you can't afford things.
Unfortunately, people
you have no money. They're allowed to, but like I'm gonna take your complaining card away when I see you buying all that crap or that Audis in the driveway that you financed, right?
Yeah, sure. It's funny. That sounds like the 12th step of AA.
Oh yeah,
you just said right there.
I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with it.
So I'm not. Thankfully, I'm going to raise my hand. Thankfully, I haven't been through the program, but I know many people how helpful it is for them to go through that 12-step program for alcohol. And the 12th step is like helping other addicts, other alcoholics, but you don't get embroiled with them. It's like, so you chose to drink again. I understand that, right? And you came back to me, and I'm not gonna tell you you're wrong to make that choice to have another drink, but we know where this is going, right? That you've been through the 11 steps, and that having that drink or smoking that joint or whatever the addiction is, that's not what I'm gonna do. That's not what you should do. But I'm not here to judge you. Let me know when you're done with that if you want to come back, right? And it sounds like there's almost like an addiction to this consumerist payment. Like I can afford it, or I can slot it into my payment, monthly payment. It's like an addiction in a way.
There is, and then it becomes a silent addiction because things like your Netflix subscription or whatnot, like once it hits that plastic, right? Going back to the very first thing we talked about, once it hits those cards, you never see it again, really. Like it's just hitting you every single month. And like most people aren't checking their statements, most people aren't looking through it, right? Like, and so it's not top of mind. It's not like you're literally having to write a check or pull cash out of your wallet to pay for this stuff every single month. It's just, hitting you in the background all the time. And, you don't really look at it or care and whatnot. And yeah, it really can be an addiction. And it's like silently just cutting at you.
Yeah, it's like a reverse IV, draining your bank account.
Yeah,
drip
exactly.
by drip, right? Yeah, it's interesting. The old it's maybe they need to start teaching like mathematics and whatever they teach in school, grammar. I don't even know if they teach grammar. They need to have financial literacy 101 from grade 1.
They do. I always joke there's this meme that comes out at tax time every year here in the United States. You might see the same thing, but it's like, I'm so glad I learned trigonometry in high school. It really helps me when I'm doing my trigonometry return, right? Like
exactly.
It's like, no, people need to learn how to do their taxes. Sure. I always love a tax return because it's like, this is like your recap of your year, right? Yeah. Like how much you earned. This is like your report card as an adult, basically.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it is. Can we
like
look at it?
you need to understand it. What'd you make? What'd you pay in taxes? What'd you save? Because I mean, in the United States, we have like our retirement plans and stuff. You actually put it on your tax
401k or
return.
whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. So how much did you save? And then your net bottom line there. Like you need to know.
Oh man, you know what? That it is a report card. You know what's interesting is that here's some advice I would give. You know, if there's people that listening out there, I'd say know your net worth, man. Know what your net worth is. A lot of people, you ask them, even successful people, you say, "Hey, what's your net worth?" They'll be like, "Huh."
Totally. And then you know what I would say too, like those cars, that stuff, and and it's not part of your net worth.
No.
Maybe a house if you're paid off, but like don't be like, oh, I drive a $40,000 car, but it's like, okay, that's what do you owe on that car? And then it's depreciating literally every day it goes by, it's worth less and less. But
it's the worst kind of asset to own.
Right. It's like it's a depreciating just mess out there,
Yeah.
Not even.
Well, even your personal home is really a liability.
Oh gosh, yeah. The path to wealth is not through your personal home. Like,
yeah. I think that's probably a good place to call it. Let's get some final words of advice out there for let's not make it student loan based. Make it give the people something that in the financial sophistication in general. Give them some tidbit.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it starts simple. Let's just get organized, because then you can actually have a real conversation with yourself, your family, whatever that looks like. But know where you stand. We talked about it just a second ago. Know your net worth, but it's like know what's coming in, know what's going out, know what your assets are, know what your liabilities are. I promise you that will put you in the 1% right there. Just getting organized with your money, that you do you. Once again, like, I'm not here to tell you to go side hustle if you don't want to, but maybe that's what works for you. But maybe you need to cut something out of your budget. I don't know. But like, if you're not organized, if you don't have it all laid out for yourself, you can't even make that choice rationally, right? You're just guessing. So don't guess anymore. Like, know where you stand.
Know where you stand. So that's Robert Farrington, folks, thecollegeinvestor.com. I'm not going to spell that for you. If you can't spell it, you don't deserve to go to that website. Thecollegeinvestor.com. I'm super grateful if you made it to the end of this podcast. I know Robert is as well, folks. Thank you for listening. And don't forget the podcast angel on your shoulder who's whispering in your ear. And what is he saying? He's saying, start your own podcast. Start your own podcast. You can do it. You listen to podcasts because you have something to say too. You know what? I would say, if you want some advice from me about podcasts, I do 5 or so. Don't get involved in the production. That's where all the pain and anguish is. That's where everybody fails. They think, I can download this app on my iPhone and tomorrow I have the Joe Rogan experience. Doesn't work that way, man. If you don't have $1,000 to spend on your podcast, don't start a podcast. And if you're not willing to do 6 episodes, don't do it, because 90% of podcasts have 1 episode, 95% of podcasts have 2, and then the rest of all the other podcasters is probably 1%. So most podcasts on Podomatic or at least might have 1 or 2 episodes. You know why? It's not because they don't like recording. It's because they don't like producing. So you got to go to getagripstudios.com. Love you, folks. Thanks for listening. From my heart.